Welcome to the Voice of the Coast. I am your host, Danica Long. With me, we have Dr. Eric Melancon, who is the St. Mary Parish Coroner. Of course, you wear other hats, and we'll get to some of that maybe you can kind of flip-flop going back and forth through your profession as well as your doctor profession as well as coroner. But let's kind of stick to, I guess, both, because both of them have a lot to do with COVID. Now, we're not going to go too far into COVID, but we're going to kind of touch the surface with COVID because there are actual cases of the flu, which you don't really hear about anymore.
Sure. Right now, I think what people need to realize is that COVID's still around. It's certainly not as toxic or potent as it once was with the original ancestral strain or even the Delta strain. I think the biggest confusion and questions I get from patients is the vaccines. You know, booster. Well, you know, the old booster is out. We should not booster ourselves with the old booster, in my opinion. They have a new bivalent vaccine, which is supposed to cover for these new Omicron variants, which is, I'm not sure actually if it's available here or not, but if you're at high risk, I certainly think it's wise to take it. Most people are, you know, kind of over the COVID stuff and ready to be done with it. Out there now, we do have flu vaccines, although we're seeing flu now. In fact, in the last 2 days in the office, I've seen 4 or 5 cases of influenza A. The funny thing is COVID and influenza, their symptomatology mimics each other right now, and you never know exactly what you have. So be careful, and certainly if you're sick, stay home, because we don't, even though it's milder, we don't want anybody to get sick and potentially die.
Right, and from what we understand with COVID, you're still getting the symptoms of the lack of taste. I think that is one of the things
I hadn't seen as much taste. More of it has been flu-like symptoms. It's body aches, fever, chills, you know, cough. There are occasionally a person that I've seen with COVID that has had a decrease in their sense of taste, and it kind of makes me wonder, is that a different strain that we just hadn't picked up on? We're not a sentinel at my office. Dr. Blairo's the sentinel, so when his swabs come through, then those are sent off for typing and things like that. You know, but for the most part, I think it's good. The people who are actually dying of the disease are typically your aged population with multiple comorbid conditions. That doesn't mean that if you're young and healthy, you should ignore it. Let's make sure we're clear on that, because we want to take care of ourselves.
Yes. So, of course, we're now on the, you know, we're being very proactive when it comes to flu, and just, you know, still washing your hands and things of that nature. But are we also seeing, you know, it's the changing of the weather? I mean, are we seeing just like sinus infections?
Well, you know, there's a respiratory syncytial virus with an enterovirus combination that's been infecting kids and adults. I have seen 1 case of that. Of course, a lot of times we see cases and we don't even know that that's what it is, because we don't extend that testing. Because it does tend to get expensive. I did have one that I actually sent because I just couldn't figure out why they kept getting sick. And that's what they had. So those things are there. Another virus that's out there, and I heard of a reported case on the west side of the parish, that's West Nile. We had 1 case, and that can be a fairly serious disease for some people. Of course, the best way to prevent that is cover yourself with mosquito spray when you're outside. Check your yard, make sure that you don't have any standing water, old tires, bowls or planters or things like that. And certainly if you live on or near water, which we've had tons of rain, you got to be very diligent about that.
Who are you telling? Oh, yes.
You live on the water, and so do I.
A lot of mosquitoes, and these mosquitoes are like birds. And they're very powerful. I don't know. I mean, they're very powerful.
We're seeing a lot of what we call no-see-ums. And I'm not an entomologist, so I don't know what the actual term for them is. It's little, I guess, gnat-like creatures, and they are very aggressive with all this rain. I've seen patients who come in just eaten alive almost, and they, while it's not a toxic bite, it can cause a localized inflammatory reaction, and you see a lot of swelling and redness, especially when you get multiple bites in one area. So be careful with that. Treat them symptomatically. You know, protect yourself from secondary infection. Put a little Neosporin or Bactroban or something like that on it, and, you know, take care of yourself.
You were right to call them creatures.
They are rough.
Because they're just small little creatures, and when you think about it, it just seems very monstrous. But that's something I never knew, that you treat mosquito bites.
You can. I've seen some pretty severe cases of mosquito bites or no-see-um bites, and it can become secondarily infected, and it causes cellulitis, and that's when you need antibiotics.
Gotcha. Well, see, you just really informed all of us of something very interesting.
That's my job.
Well, there's much more to learn, so come on back right here on The Voice of the Coast with yours truly. Welcome back to the Voice of the Coast. I am your host, Danica. Along with me, we have our St. Mary Parish Coroner, Dr. Eric Melancon. We're going to transition a little bit because, like I said, we don't want to talk too much about COVID because it's still around. And
Correct.
you said this years ago, right? When we first started talking, it's going to be here, and just about everybody and their mama done had it, will have it. I mean, it's just kind of.
I haven't.
Well, I'm not
Thank
gonna say that. That's right, knock on wood. But just about, I mean, you hear it so much now.
Sure.
It's just becoming kind of like as common as the flu. But unfortunately, it's kind of transitioned to something else that you have to deal with, and that is suicide. When we always try to do something first of the year, and we compare year to year. We're already at September. What are our rates looking like with suicide, with the data?
Well, last year was probably the highest suicide rate we had. We had 14 suicide deaths, which is an extraordinary amount when our parish typically only had 4 on average. We did see an uptick in 2020, but 2021 was certainly a terrible year for suicide. And right now we're already exceeding the 4. We're at 6. And again, any suicide, as far as I'm concerned, is too many. The dilemma is it's hard to identify. And you know, there's a lot of people who are in contact with people who commit suicides who take a lot of blame, and it's really not something that they should take blame for. There is a very difficult task that we need to try and do, which is to help identify that. I know the suicide awareness is usually in the fall, which should be coming up. I remember last year we kind of cut back on it because of the Delta variant outbreak, and you know, a lot of this stuff has been put off, but our mental health has certainly deteriorated because of the COVID pandemic and the stressors associated with economic stress and familial stress.
And speaking of mental health, I don't think you have any dealings with this, but since we're on the topic of it, there will be a mental health forum in the city of Patterson. If you check it out on their Facebook page, you'll have all the details. You also mentioned the suicide awareness. There's an organization, and typically in the fall, there's a walk. They do this, but I believe Suicide Awareness Day is September 19th, which is actually coming up. I know COVID did actually cut down and shut down a lot of things, but I think people are starting to kind of, you know, ramp it up and start, you know, doing a lot more outreach when it comes to that. You know, as a doctor, right? I mean, how do you speak to that to try to prevent? Well, if that's the right way to say that.
It's difficult in prevention. I mean, it takes a lot of identification, and identification, what leads someone to actually committing suicide is very different amongst a lot of people. You know, people typically who have comorbid conditions, you know, previous mental health disorder, a chronic pain syndrome type system, or a drug addiction, those people are at a much higher risk. We've seen a trend from previous where, you know, typically in St. Mary Parish for the last few years, we've seen a lot of, most of the suicide-related deaths were older men, 50 plus, who had financial stressors and things like that. But now we're seeing a younger trend, and we're seeing a lot more females. And the methodology seems to be variable as well. We've had an overdose death. We've had a hanging death. We've had, you know, typical gun-related death, but most of the time those are handguns. We're seeing long guns and shotguns. And I mean, again, it's one of the hardest things for me to accept and take is a suicide, because I just wish there was something we could figure out that says, hey, this person's definitely a high risk. All I ask is that anybody who would have a suspicion, let somebody know.
And I want to transition to this before we head out, because there are numbers that you can call. That is 800-273-8255. Again, 800-273-8255, and also 988 is the text number or SMS that you can reach out to. So again, I agree with you. Please reach out to someone, and don't be afraid or embarrassed to reach out. So we're going to go and take a short break, but come on back. I think this next one is going to get really good, so come on back for this next segment. Welcome back to the Voice of the Coast. Again, I'm your host, Danica Long. With me, St. Mary Parish Coroner, Dr. Eric Melancon. All right, let's get to it. I wasn't there. However, there's video out there. Actually, there's video right there on KWVJ TV 22 where anyone can check it out. The St. Mary Parish Council actually now offers streaming video of their meetings. And you were at that meeting. A little upset, maybe. And you were kind of recounting, I guess, the budgetary needs of the coroner's office. Would you like to kind of explain some of that to us?
Well, you know, from the coroner's standpoint, we do our best to be as fiscally responsible as we can. There are needs that this parish has that have been a need since I took over in 2019. Unfortunately, I didn't make the budget for 2019, but in 2020, I did realize we needed a morgue. For 2020, I did realize we needed a morgue expansion. We certainly didn't have enough space. FEMA recommended we have at least 10 capacity. We only have 4.
When it comes to the morgue, right?
When it comes to the morgue, yes,
Okay.
ma'am. And of course, what happened when COVID hit, that was the first question they asked us, what was our morgue capacity? The parishes fell short on the needs of the morgue, claiming that they just didn't have the money. Okay. But I then realized that our parish president wasn't even presenting my budget to the budgetary committee or to the parish council, which angered a few of the parish council members. So I figured what an opportunity to take it. Our budgets just were turned in this month, and I wanted to make sure that I put it in their hands myself. And those needs are not needs that I need. I mean, you know, I ask for nothing for myself. I ask it for the needs for the parish and to serve the people. We had a van that we were able to purchase back in 2020 for $500, which certainly was a heck of a deal. But it was an older vehicle, and last year the maintenance board told us it was time to be replaced. And again, we're patching it through, but obviously it needs to be replaced. And you know, when we look at the effects of what Hurricane Ida did just east of us, we actually need 2 because the Calumet Cut Bridge is an issue. So you know, vehicle and morgue-wise, we're certainly deficient because in order to do the job appropriately, we need to have that available because it actually saves us money overall.
Now let's just get this straight. So the morgue we have in St. Mary Parish can accommodate 4 bodies.
4 bodies.
So at any given time, if you have more than 4 people that have deceased and need to occupy a space, they'll likely just be sitting at the funeral home. Is that correct?
Correct. Or I have to borrow space, which
Wow.
again is not appropriate because that means that we're utilizing somebody's resource without paying them. So
in that case, so I do know and we can go back to, you know, our previous interviews. You talked about a mobile morgue, so a morgue on wheels. About how many people, bodies, would it be able to accommodate?
Well, initially in 2019, I'd spec'd out a car hauler trailer and, you know, the equipment necessary to make it into a mobile morgue because they really didn't have mobile morgues being built at that point. The cost of that would have been less than $10,000. So I budgeted $10,000 in 2020 for that purchase. Of course, that didn't happen. When COVID hit shortly there, a few months later, there were mobile morgues that were being built. So now we have specs, and I just didn't feel comfortable, having a homemade mobile morgue. But FEMA would have offset that cost and paid almost 90% of the cost of that. Of course, the cost was not $10,000, it was $25,000. But still, instead of paying 10 grand for the homemade one, ultimately the parish would have only paid $2,500. I then had an opportunity to get a free one, which the cost of those went even more, but it certainly would have increased the capacity well beyond what we need, and that didn't get addressed. And I'm not sure what else I need to do. I can lead everything there. I don't run the accounts, and I was told I don't have the ability to write for grants, but I will change that this year.
Now, I will say this, appreciate your transparency. I have contacted the parish president and have offered him an opportunity to come here because I would love to know what can be done or if there is something being discussed about this matter. So again, you're welcome to come. I'm waiting for you to give me a call back. So come on back right here on The Voice of the Coast with yours truly. We have much more to cover. Welcome back. This is our last segment with the coroner, Dr. Eric Melancon. Let's kind of get right into it. We took last segment to kind of go over just some budgetary issues that you're having within your department. Are you functioning well enough to meet the needs of the parish?
We function fine. I mean, I have top-notch investigators who are highly trained and very good at their task. The problem is the transportation of bodies, which allows us to maintain chain of custody. It also allows us to store the necessary equipment we need to investigate, these deaths. There's times when law enforcement may not have all the resources or the tools available to investigate a scene properly, or we might be able to add something to it. It's the same conversation I had with our district attorney, Bo Dewey. The more I can do to help, the better off it is, and he's completely in agreement with that. Of course, there's necessary things that law enforcement typically have, and we defer to them for the most part, but if it's not there and we can supplement that investigation, that's what we want to do.
You mentioned you have highly trained investigators, so I know at one time with COVID, there was a lot of, just everything was at a standstill. Have you been able to make some of those conferences? And
well, we have one investigator that's certified. The other one came from law enforcement. He basically had all the exact same classes. He just does not have the certification of a medical legal death investigator. He has it from the law enforcement side as far as the investigation. And I found that we could get him certified. It's just an added cost at this point that we didn't need to bear because we were getting the quality work. Eventually we will do that. I guess I could probably ask just to see if he could sit for the test because he's really had all the classes. But neither here nor there, that part of it I feel confident with. The making sure that we have the resources available so that we can continue to do that quality work is important to me.
Something we've talked about before, but I'd like to bring it up again and just kind of inform the public, educate the public, CECs, right? I actually had a conversation with someone about that and, the role and responsibility of the public if you get involved, kind of break that down for us.
Well, CECs are what we do when we have people in the hospital who are under a PEC. I think what you're describing is the OPC, the Order of Protective Custody.
Okay.
And again, we've been where we would try and get to people who couldn't get out because again, like I said with suicides, identifying issues. If we can identify that people are declining, let's OPC them and take care of it. Everybody's afraid, oh, well, they can come back and sue me. That's so rare. And if you actually are telling the truth, there is no recourse for them. I can't do it. I've had someone send me a thing talking about monkeypox, and I said, I haven't heard any, but, and what it was a person on Facebook just blurting out there because she didn't care. And obviously, she was a drug addicted person, and even it shocked me at how open she was about her addiction and abuse on Facebook, and it broke my heart because I can't do anything because I don't see that. I hope somebody goes about it. I even discussed it with my investigator in law enforcement, and a law enforcement officer was there, and he said he knew him very well.
Yeah.
And everything was true.
So it's kind of like almost a wellness check, but with documentation.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
And I need people to take that step, and we want to try and make that step very easily so we don't have people commit suicide or get into a problem where they overdose and die.
Well, thank you. It was so good to have you back. I know it's been a while, but for you guys, of course, we want you to subscribe to us so you can always stay in contact. We are KWBJ TV 22 on Facebook. See you guys next time.